There's no avoiding messy data, whether it's splitting columns, merging tables with V or XLOOKUP, unpivoting, transposing data, or removing duplicates, to name a few. And what's worse is having to repeat these laborious tasks every month or week or more. Unfortunately, most people think you need VBA programming skills to automate these boring tasks, but that's not the case. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 common data gathering and cleaning tasks that you can automate with absolutely zero code, so you can cut your repetitious data cleanup time by up to 95%. And I'm not exaggerating. If you want to try it yourself afterwards, you'll find the link to download the file in the video description. Okay, let's get started. Here I have a table of everyone's favorite movies in a single cell separated by commas for each person, but I want them in a list like this, where I've got the count of each time the movie was listed. Let's go back to the example file and we'll use Power Query to fix the layout. Now the data's already in a table, so I'm going to load it into Power Query from the Data tab from Table Range. And then select the movie column, and on the Home tab I'm going to split the column by delimiter. Now it's detected that there's a comma separating each movie, but there's also a space after that comma. So I'm going to go in and choose a custom delimiter, which is the comma followed by a space. And then under advanced options, you can see by default it's going to split the data into new columns, but I want a list of the movies going down the rows. So I'm going to choose rows, click OK. Now I have all my movies in a column. But remember, some people may have chosen the same movies, so I want to group them and add a count so we know which movies are most popular. I can do that using the Group By tool. It's going to group it by the movie column, it's going to count them, and it's going to count the rows. I'll click OK, and now I can see the count by movie, but let's sort it in descending order. We can see the most popular movie at the top. Now there's some tie breaks here, so let's also sort the favorite movie column alphabetically in ascending order. Okay, let's close and load, and this is going to load the data in an Excel table on a new sheet. And there's our list of movies sorted in descending order based on the count, and then within that based on the movie name. And it looks like Fight Club is first up. Here I've got a list of product codes, product names, and their price. And I need to separate the product code, alpha and numeric characters into their own columns. But notice they're not all the same size. Some have 4 letters followed by 3 numbers, some have 3 letters followed by 4 numbers, and so on. Let's load them into Power Query from Table Range and see how we can handle this. So selecting the product code column, I'm going to split the column by, and at the bottom we've got digit to non-digit or non-digit to digit. Now I've got non-digits first, so I want non-digit to digit. And just like that, we've got the alpha code followed by the numeric code. Let's double click the column headers and we'll rename this alpha, and the same for this one, numeric. And I'll close and load. It's going to load it into a table on a new worksheet. And there's my data. Now the great thing about Power Query is if my source data changes, for example, if I have a new record added, and we'll add one for an SSD card that's 1 terabyte and $99.99. We can go back to our query table, right click, and refresh, and keep an eye on row 32 because it's going to bring in that new data just like that. One of the most time-consuming tasks is often just getting your data into Excel from external files or databases. But with Power Query, we can set up a query to automate this. Here I have a folder with 6 CSV files that I need to import into Excel and consolidate into one table, and from there I can create a report. So I'll go back to Excel on the Data tab. I'm going to get data from File, from Folder. I just need to browse to the folder containing the files, which is this one. Click Open. Here it shows me a list of the files in that folder, and at the bottom I can combine and transform if I've got more data cleaning to do, or I can just combine and load them directly. Let's combine and transform data so we can have a look at the query editor before loading it. Here I can specify the file origin and delimiter. It's correctly detected them as we can see in the preview, so I'm going to click OK to go to the next step. In the query editor on the left at the top, we can see the queries it's automatically created for me when it combined the files. And then the query that I have selected is the final query with the single table of data. Now the first column in my data is the file name. I don't need it, so I'm just going to select it and press the delete key. And over here, let's rename this combined files, but you typically give it a name that reflects the dataset, like sales. And notice below in the applied steps pane, Power Query's recorded all of the steps I've taken so far, much like you might record a macro, and this means I can run this query again to get updates. Let's take a look. I'll close and load, and this time I'm going to choose close and load to, and here I'm going to choose pivot table report, and it's going to put it on a new sheet. I'll click OK, and in my pivot table, let's just bring the field list over a bit closer. So I want to summarize the revenue by region, and let's put the date across the columns. And there's my data already summarized. And then when next month rolls round and my July data gets added to the folder, I can simply go back to my query file, go to the data tab of the ribbon, and keep an eye on column H because July's data is going to appear after I click refresh all. And just like that, my reports are updated. And of course, you can build multiple pivot tables and charts from that query data, and they would all be updated with refresh all. This is just one example of the type of data you can get with Power Query. You can also get data from Excel files, databases, web pages, PDFs, even images, enabling you to cut out these laborious data gathering and cleaning tasks. I get so much feedback about Power Query for the incredible time-saving benefits. Here's a comment left by Emmanuel on how they produce their work in half the time. And that's just one of many. If you're serious about taking your Excel skills to the next level and improving productivity, the quickest and easiest way is with Power Query. In my comprehensive course, I cover everything from the basics to advanced techniques, and I personally provide support both as you work through the tutorials and when it comes time to implementing the techniques in your own work, because that's when you need it, right? You'll find the link to the course in the description below the video or in the pinned comment. In this next tip, I show you how you can easily replace lookup formulas to compare two lists. Not only is this easier than writing a VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP, it's also way more flexible. Here I have two employee lists, and I want to identify which employees are on both lists. For the purpose of this example, I've highlighted in red font the employees that are only on one list. My data is formatted in Excel tables, so I'm quickly going to load it to Power Query from table range. And then I'm going to close and load to, and I'll just create a connection, click OK, and let's repeat for the second table. Again, close and load to, just create a connection, click OK, and then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Alt F12 to open the query editor. And there's my two lists. Now all I need to do is merge them together, which I can do from the Home tab, and then merge queries, and I'll create a new query. I've got my first list already selected. Let's select the second one. Now I need to identify which columns to match, so you click the first column in the first table and again in the second table, and then I want to match both columns, so holding Control, I'll select the second set of columns. Let's just pause for a moment because this is the equivalent of writing a lookup formula that matches two columns in each table. In other words, list 1 is looking up the name and ID columns in the list 2 table. And then in the join kind drop-down, we have lots of ways we can look up the data to compare the lists. The left and right outer allow you to make one list the primary list to compare to. The full outer brings in all rows from both tables, the inner brings in only matching rows, and the left anti and right anti bring in rows that are present in one table but not the other. Now I want to find all employees that are in both lists, so I want the inner join. And I'll click OK. And we're left with 17 names that are on both lists. This list 2 column here contains my data from table 2. Selecting the white space beside table, you can see at the bottom it's matched the same person. So these contain the same names. I don't need this column, therefore I can just delete it. But first, let's go into the Applied Steps pane and I'll click on the cog icon and let's have a look at one of the other join types. For example, full outer, which is going to bring in all rows from both tables. I'll click OK. Notice we've got a null here. That's where we've got names in this table that aren't present in the first one. Let's expand this table and I'll bring in both columns and click OK.
So now we can see this is list 1's name and ID, and this is list 2's name and ID. There's 2 people here that aren't on list 1, and vice versa, there's 2 people here that aren't on list 2. So you can see this is super handy for comparing lists, and for homework you can try out the other join types. I'll rename this compare lists, and I'll close and load. One of the most common data layout problems is data that's already pivoted, like we have here with the sales in separate columns for each month, when what we actually need is the data in a tabular layout where we've got a column for date and a column for the sales amount. So let's go back to the example file and we'll see how we can fix this layout with Power Query. So we'll go from table range, and then I'm going to right click my product column and go unpivot other columns. And now I have a separate column for the date and a column for the values. By unpivoting the other columns, if I have more columns for more months added to my original data, they'll automatically be unpivoted as well. Now I need an actual date in this column, so let's fix this data here to remove the sales underscore. We can do that from the Transform tab. We're going to extract text after delimiter. The delimiter is the underscore. Click OK. And now I need to replace the underscore here with a /, which we can do from replace values. The value to find is the underscore, and we're replacing it with the /. And now all I need to do is change the data type to a date. Now I've got a date for the first day of each month. My dates are formatted day, month, year. Let's double click to rename this date, and this one sales. And I'll just change the query name to unpivoted. And we'll go to the Home tab, and I'll close and load. It's going to insert a table on a new sheet. And there's my data, ready to summarize and analyze with formulas or pivot tables. And next month, when new sales are added, all I need to do is go to my table and either right-click and refresh, or if I've got pivot tables connected to my dataset, go to the Data tab and refresh all.
Now that you have your data in a format that can be quickly and easily summarized in a pivot table, you'll want to check out my video on pivot table tricks that will change the way you Excel. It's packed with advanced tips and includes a free file to help you get started. Just click on it to watch it next, and I'll see you there.